Hey, Denise, this is John. Just saying hi to everyone. Nice to see everybody on the flip side.
Great. Thank you, John. Welcome. And anybody else? All right, Troy, are you there with us? Want to do a quick intro? Welcome.
Yeah, happy 2021, everyone. Pardon me for being late. I had a call with a representative, and it's kind of hard to hang up on a representative.
We fully understand, Troy. Yeah. We also understand if you have to like leap away from the call, just shoot us a quick message.
Okay.
All good.
So
Okay.
I was going to say, I don't have too much to update on. I think the first conversation that I had with you folks took place after the governor's recommended budget was released. So there aren't any changes there. However, the one thing that is different from my conversation with you all then and now is that we do have bill numbers for the upcoming session for the 6 pieces of legislation that the agency is working on, as well as the policy option package numbers. And again, the policy option package is a request that an agency makes, a budget request that an agency makes that goes beyond the current legislatively appropriated budget. A couple of things. Next week is organizational days for the legislature. So during that week, the new legislators, the new representatives and senators who were elected in November will get sworn in. But another big thing that takes place next week is the release of all the pre-session filed bills. So legislators have an opportunity to draft bill concepts prior to session starting. And so those bills that were drafted prior to session starting will be released next week. Myself and a couple other folks at the division will be scurrying to try to figure out what bills impact the early care and education sector and the agency. Another thing is, so session starts the week after next, the day after MLK Day. I think it's the 18th or 19th. It's the 19th, the Tuesday. And one of the things that you'll notice this session that was different from the last is that we'll have an early childhood committee. Speaker Kotek brought that committee back, and that will be chaired by Karin Power, who's a representative from Milwaukee. And then the co-vice chairs are Representative Sherry Scouten from the Beaverton area, and then the other is Rep. Jack Zika from Redmond. He's been really involved in some of the early care and education issues in the legislature. So that's all I think I have for now. What I'll do is I'll send Carmen the list of bills with the numbers so that you folks can track those if you'd like in the Oregon Legislative Information System. Any questions?
Troy, can you tell us a little bit more about what that committee does and what their role will be? Yeah,
so committees, so typically during a full legislative session, the presiding officer of either chamber, whether that's the House or the Senate, will sort of set a policy agenda for that chamber. And sometimes that policy agenda is set forth in the sorts of committees that they form for that session. So for example, we've had housing committees in the past. We had a joint committee on student success because that was working on one particular set of piece of legislation. So in this case, the Speaker of the House, Tina Kotek, is prioritizing early care and education policy for the next biennium. So she brought that committee back so that all the discussions related to early care and education policy take place in the early childhood committee.
Hey, this is Molly in Milton Oak. Trey, Francis and I just met with Rep-elect Reynolds from our area, and she referenced that she was the vice chair on that committee. On the early childhood.
She's on the committee, but I don't think unless I misread, I thought it was Sherry Scouten and Rep. Zika. But I can double check that. Yes, we being Miriam and I, chatted with Rep-elect Reynolds recently too. Yeah. I think she's going to be a great ally when it comes to the work that we do. So
I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right. Some other questions for Troy before we let him go?
And it sounds like I'm going to be making a regular appearance, so don't fret if you don't get your question in this time.
Troy, sorry if you just said this. I was also attending to the chat box, but
Oh,
the information that you send me will also include a list of the representatives who are on that committee.
No, the list that I send you will be the legislative agenda for the division itself.
Okay.
But I can send you along with that. I can send you a list of who those folks are on that committee.
That'd be great. I think that'd be interesting for us all to be able to see. Thank you.
And then one other thing that we're talking about that committee, Rep Power and Rep Zika are also, they formed a caucus. And a caucus is like a group of legislators who get together on a singular topic, or it's kind of like a club. There's a caucus for BIPOC folks. There was a queer caucus. I don't think that's still around. So in this case, they formed an early childhood caucus as well. And so this is a place where legislators can get together to just chat about early care and education policy and what they're working on. I don't have, caucuses are not, I don't think there's the same sort of public disclosure laws as a committee because they operate a little differently. So for example, I don't think there are tape meetings of caucuses. But if you wanted more information, I'd reach out to either the office of Rep Zika or Rep Karn Power on that.
Last burning questions. All right. Well, thanks, Troy. We appreciate your time today and look forward to having you
Alrighty.
for a successful session. Thank you.
Yeah, and it looks like Beth just put in the list of the folks on that committee in the chat box.
Yeah, that was from the press release from Speaker Kotek, yes,
Thank
on
you.
the 31st.
Thank you.
Well, you folks have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Troy. All right. Well, so moving along in our agenda, just a quick update on, I know you were all excited last week in the middle of holidays. I know many people were out. I got out of office replies to get the monitoring report from 1719 finally completed. We appreciate your patience in that. Yes, so much work on all of our parts, I know, and got a little waylaid by that COVID thing in getting it completed. But just a couple of comments I want to make about the report in general, which is, as you can tell from the report, we really made a choice this time around, or a choice, when we worked on this a couple of years ago, was to have a system-wide report rather than how we did it in 15-17, where we really did that focus hub by hub. So you saw that the report was very much about the whole system, with things sprinkled in about the partner survey, other pieces that we saw across the system. And then, of course, we didn't want to miss out on the chance to do a little bragging about some of the great and promising work that each hub is doing in your region. And so that's where the summary piece of the report came from as well. So when I sent those documents out to you, I asked if anybody had any specific changes in your summary document that were really, something's really off here, I don't understand this, or you missed something, to let me know. What I don't want to do is I don't have the time or inclination to change those summary reports. And so I understand, for some folks, when you're reading it, you're like, well, gee, I wasn't the director at the time, my name should be on there. Remember, this is about monitoring from 17-19 contract period. So we want it to be clear to the time period. And also, I know that some things, you were in the process of starting that you now may have finished, right? So it's different than it was, but we're trying to really reflect the correct time period for the monitoring report. So if folks have like one or two sentences like, we really wanted you to get this in there, Denise, go ahead and send that to me. But like full court changes, we just don't have time to make. We really need to publish the report this week. We wanted to have the report published by year's end, but because of all the folks that need to get their fingers on it for branding, et cetera, I was able to push it out so we could all have a look at it before it went public on the website. But we want it there when the session starts as well, because it's good historical background for all of you. And if people need it, I'll remind you that as part of the monitoring process, you submitted very rich narrative documents, as well as the rubrics that we completed together during that time period, your partner surveys, et cetera. So I would say to reference those, especially as you're sharing the monitoring report with your governance councils and your partners, that you have that supporting documentation as well. So I know there's probably a couple burning questions. Anybody have questions I can answer right now? And we can also, for those of you that have already emailed me, I've got your comments. I know, like, I'll just take a good example. Kelly's, and I should remember this, but the name of their hub actually changed while we were there during the monitoring process, that a formal move to change that name to really reflect the work in early childhood happened while we were out there monitoring at the governance council meeting. So things like that, we're going to go ahead and we can make those adjustments.
Denise.
Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
I appreciate seeing the summaries, and I appreciate your kind of couching it that this was virtually 2 years ago now. I'm wondering about the messaging to legislators, because I also don't want them to perceive this as where we are now. And so have you had any thoughts on that? Or
That's a great question. Joan, do you want to react to that, or?
Well, let me ask you, Brenda, do you have thoughts on how you'd like to see us? I mean, I think we'll try to be as straightforward as possible related to the time period this covers, and include, you know, languaging like what Denise just talked about related to, you know, that a lot of work has happened since this report was completed. And, you know, I think I would certainly be comfortable even saying, you know, for the most up-to-date information about the actual work that's happening in your hub, you know, we can provide contact information. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with doing all those things if that's like what you were hoping for, but I'd love to know what you were thinking.
yeah, we're like many others of my hub brethren, I know, we're in the process of putting together kind of fact sheets and updates for legislators, and some are probably way ahead of us. We're just kind of wrapping ours up, but I just didn't want us to be in a place where we're providing one thing and out of the ELD is something that are really apples and oranges to where we are now, and have that become an issue for us down the road. So I haven't thought of a solution, but I'm game to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we, you know, we have a responsibility, obviously, to publish the report. It was for a particular time period, but we'll do everything we can to make it as clear as possible that we're confident that all hubs have continued with their endeavors. And, you know, for most up-to-date information, people really need to be in contact directly with their hub. I think that's probably the best we can do. But if someone thinks of something better than that, please let us know.
Thank you.
All right, so if folks do have, like I said, any minor adjustments, quick changes, simple additions, we can go ahead and make those. And then my hope is to do that this afternoon, finalize that work, and then send those to our communication department for publishing as well. And like I said, my suggestion would be to, hopefully you will share that information out with your partners, as well as when you just think about the amount of work we've completed since the monitoring, just the sector planning work that you've all done, the coordinated enrollment work. There is so much more. So just to keep in mind, it's a snapshot in time, and we will certainly make sure that that information is clear as well. So thanks again, you guys, for helping us finalize that piece. Go ahead, Bess.
Real quick, Denise, just since we're on the topic, and I've only been in the role one round of monitoring reporting. So just curious, what's the future of monitoring? Like, are we going to be doing any monitoring activities this year, or not asking to do them, just asking what you're thinking? Just want to make that clear.
I was about to give you the
Otherwise, my hub director sisters and brothers will be shooting me looks.
I think, and Joan may have a different answer, but I think that in light of the fact that we are going to be doing a granting process, right? Moving from contracts to grants in this year, that feels like enough. That will be a process for all of us to be involved in. A little bit more to come about that as we move forward in the meeting. But I do not believe, especially with COVID and the way that we have conducted the monitoring process. As you know, we would have started already in November with the partner surveying based on what our schedule would be. But in light of everything that's happening, we'll not be doing the same process, obviously, in this biennium. And I think as part of our new granting process, we're going to have a new monitoring process as well that'll be more tied to the upcoming grant. So more to come on that. I don't know, Joan, if you have anything else, but I think we're not quite there yet.
No, I think that's true because we definitely have gotten a lot of feedback from all of you regarding reporting. So as a part of the granting process, we're going to be taking a look at required reporting with your assistance. And so I think that needs to feed into any kind of monitoring process that we're going to do. I see those things as being very much connected to each other. And I noticed that Sue Miller put in the chat box a suggestion about pointing people who visit our website to more recent updated information from hubs. And I think that's something we can further explore. If, for example, it sounds like you said you're all working on some very specific documents to share. We can have some further conversation with our communications department about whether or not we're directing people to your websites for that, if that's where you're going to put it. So I think we can explore that further.
And just as a reminder, right now, the way the website is we have, when people go to click on hubs, it has a list of each of your hubs that then shows your region, who the director is, what the contact information is, and then a link to your site, as well as your updated sector plans. The last time we updated the strategic plans, there are documents there, but and to Brenda's point, please do go on. I often get emails from people telling me, hey, I just was at the website and the information is incorrect. Knowing we have a couple new directors, particularly if you would all actually do a little homework and have a look at the website, make sure that the most up-to-date information is there. And if not, please let me know and I will get that fixed for us as well. So thanks, Sue, for bringing that up, and Brenda. All right. Well, if that's it, then I think we're ready to move to the next piece of the agenda, which I don't have open in front of me, Joan, but I know it's you.
Yeah, so I have a couple things I'd like to talk about. Both are related to the legislative report, which we are on track to submit. I don't know if it'll be on January 18th or before, but in the neighborhood of January 18th. But I wanted to start by talking about where things stand related to moving to grants, because it seems like that might be helpful for all of you to know. So I think everyone knows that we've been really fortunate to have Jenny Wilfong-Cribbs join us from Business Oregon as our COO. She's been here. It's hard to, COVID time is so strange. It's hard to remember. How long has she been here? It could be 6 months. It could be 2. It's like time is very strange. But one of the things that has been really great about having Jenny on board is that she's just a master of helping us kind of understand what it is possible for us to do. So one of the things that we've been able to understand is that we are not going to have to run a request for applications process related to the early learning hubs. We're going to be able to instead focus on using the findings from, what we've learned through all the stakeholder engagement we've been doing related to the legislative report, and the legislative report to basically help us get to the right scope of work for the early learning hubs, versus having to put out something that you all will apply to. So this is not going to be a process where essentially, even though it was going to be non-competitive, you're going to have to spend a lot of time and energy essentially putting together a grant proposal. I'm hoping that at least for some of you feels less stressful, because I know there were concerns that people had associated with, like, am I going to have capacity? Will I need to hire a grant writer? And were questions that were, troubling, given all the things that you're trying to do and how you really want to be spending your time and energy in your regions. So what we're still really working out kind of the nuts and bolts of how all this will work, because some of it is certainly governed by procurement processes. But what we believe is going to be true is that we're going to be able to get advice from folks like Sue Miller and some others who are working with the council, some other key stakeholders, and then also yourselves. We'll be able to be in a position where we can work more closely with you as we're working on this scope of work. We can engage you more in conversations, we can seek your advice, and those are all things that we couldn't do under the other circumstance. So there's a lot yet for us to figure out, but our intention deadline is March 1st. So we're going to be entering into, as Denise reminded me last week, I think I have to say now it's about an 8-week period where we have to do the bulk of this work, because we still have to, of course, go through a procurement process to award these grants. So we've got to submit information to Department of Education. We've got to, have them turn that into the formalized documents. There's a lot of things to do. So we have a window of time to really work on the scope of work, to get your, as I said, your counsel and advice on that, and do a variety of things. But I wanted to start by updating you about that. I don't know if you've got super specific questions. I may not be able to answer them at this point, but we're happy to hear your questions so that we can get answers to whatever your most pressing questions are associated with that.
This is Molly Joan. Will it still be just for 2 years?
I believe that is the plan at this point, yes.
This is Begoña. Is the funding formula also going to be part of this discussion or separate discussion?
It will be something that will be part of the work that we're doing, is to look at the allocation of funding, yes. And Jenny and her team will be taking the lead on that for ELD. And Denise and others will be working more as like consultants to them, but they'll be helping us put together the funding model and the funding formula.
Hey, Joan, this is Bess. This is a tiny bit off topic, but just I did not know about Jenny, and that's great news. I'm just along those lines. Do you guys have an updated org chart or that is available for us to just reference? Because I know there's been a lot of movement and different people's going into different roles, and would just love to have a little picture of that.
Definitely make note of that.
Hey, Joan. This is John. I got really close to getting a hold of one of those, and I know that our communications department was almost ready to put it up on the website after some direction from Miriam. So I'll check back in and see if we can.
Okay, great. I
Cool.
knew we were close.
Thanks, John.
Joan, this is Kelly. Could you say what Jenny's name and title is again?
It's Will Fong, WILFONG -Cribbs, CRIBBS, and she is the Chief Operating Officer of the Early Learning Division. She essentially replaced Betsy Imholt.
Joan, I just wanted to say that I know Jenny is an incredible addition to the division. I think we all need to recognize that we were very fortunate to get her back again. She really knows our work. She obviously is passionate about it, but she also has deep ties and relationships at ODE, which obviously is a huge benefit for our work at the ELD. So I just wanted to make sure people, many of us may not know Jenny from the past, but we are incredibly fortunate to have her as a part of the team. So just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks, Sue. Yes, I didn't, obviously I didn't know her when she was working at ODE before, but she certainly had a great reputation when she was at Business Oregon. So it's great to have her.
And Lois is back as well. So that's a good update for you guys, is that Lois had gone over to Business Oregon with Jenny and now has come back with her to the division, I think for her third time with us. So that is excellent news as well. We'll be working on these pieces too. And she knows our budget well, as you all know. So she's also going to be a great addition.
Exciting to hear. So this is Lisa. Just one question about the statement of work. Is the statement of work going to be really focused in on what is currently known around the coordination, or is it going to be broader and inclusive of like KPI and coordinated enrollment and all of those pieces?
At this point in time, we believe that we are not going to integrate coordinated enrollment and KPI into this statement of work. That's, and I say it that way because we haven't started necessarily saying that we have fully made that decision, but based on the conversations that we've had today with Miriam and others, we think that it doesn't make sense to do that integration at this time. And that it makes more sense for us to keep this scope of work really focused on the work that you all do as your core functioning associated with the implementation, of course, of the system goal related to aligned, coordinated, and family-centered, leading to family outcomes, and also, of course, child outcomes, and supporting capacity to carry out that work, which, of course, is all connected with theory of change, which we'll be talking about shortly.
This is Kelly. So that kind of like, I got a little lost in that, not integrating KPI and coordinated enrollment. So is that going to be, are those projects going to continue with the hubs? It's just not part of the statement of work. So the coordinated enrollment work that we've started will continue.
Well, because those are separate agreements that you have, Kelly. So we're intending to keep them as separate agreements at this point in time and make a determination as to whether or not they should be integrated with a little more, how shall I say it, experience under the belt with coordinated enrollment. And then also KPI is going through, I would say, I guess what I would call a clarifying process, a focusing process. And to us, it made more sense to wait till that's a little bit clearer, but we intend for hubs to have also those resources. Yes, that's not changing.
This is Bess again. Just jump in here really quick. So I think, man, you talk about COVID time. I'm right there with you. Just like it's all a blur, but a while back, both Christy and I were part of the Measuring Success Committee. I think it was before the 1921 biennium, and the change in the council structure and the committee structure of the council. And just thinking about the scope of work and what kind of outcomes are going to be listed in there and what will be measured on in terms of our progress. And knowing that that work sort of went on hiatus as the council evolved and the structure changed. Just curious about sort of what outcomes you're looking at and for us to be measuring, and any information you might have now on sort of data collection and reporting that you'll be looking for in this next biennium. I know that's probably could take us down a rabbit hole, but just at a high level, is there any change or information that you might have since that sort of went a little bit radio silent, I think, on our end?
I think our intention is to use our theory of change to help us really think about what those things should be. Just speaking broadly, because we are not quite at the point where we're really discussing that fully. In terms of being able to say, like, this is exactly the direction I think we're going to go. But we really see the theory of change as giving us a framework that's based on research, best practices, your expertise that we think will help us understand and be able to communicate better about what are the things that hubs need to be doing, how do they need to be doing them to be able to produce the kind of I guess I would say shorter term, medium term, long term population level impact. So I would be looking for alignment with the theory of change.
Got it. Thank you.
Anything else on the moving to grants? Anything on that? Okay. Well, obviously, as soon as we know more details, we'll share those with you. I think we're very close to being able to have more specifics to be able to say, like, this is what we think it's going to look like. These are going to be the engagement opportunities with all of you. This is who we're going to get advice from. So we're just a little bit out from that, but we're very close on that. Okay. Carmen, are you going to be able to help me by showing the theory of change? Awesome. Okay. Can you make it just a tiny bit bigger by just so yeah, that's good. Good for me. I hope it's good for others. And of course, you also have a copy to refer to. So what I wanted to do today was to walk everybody kind of through this. Obviously, there's a lot to digest. This certainly won't be the last, in any sense of the word, conversation that we have about this. There's a lot to dig into. But I wanted to be able to give people kind of a sense of what the theory of change is really shaped up to be. Certainly to acknowledge how important your input and feedback, and thank all of you for engaging in the theory of change sessions, and then also giving us additional feedback. We very much appreciate that. And it is our intention that this theory of change will be a part of the legislative report. It will be featured in the report as essentially our working draft, because any theory of change is, of course, always kind of a work in progress. You know, you're putting together your best thinking based on what you understand from the research and practices of the time. And then you're implementing in alignment with this, you're making decisions based on this, and then you're essentially testing your theory of change. That's, you know, to state the obvious, why you call it a theory, because it isn't necessarily proven. It's what you believe to be true. I think the way to really think about this is at where you see the children arriving ready for kindergarten. Obviously, that's one of our early learning system goals. That's a population level outcome. You know, most of the research in this field would say that's at least a solid decade's work on a very focused, very prioritized to move a needle at the population level. You've got to have all the things that are about this theory of change very aligned, and you've got to get to sufficient reach and sufficient scale and et cetera. So it really functions both as, it's not just aspirational in the sense that we actually do want to achieve this for all children, but it is something that to achieve a population level discernible change is also something that will continue to be aspirational for some time. So you can see here that, so this is kind of like our ultimate impact, the ultimate changes that we want to bring about. And so working our way backward, what are, you know, it's kind of what is the next sort of like, what are the things that are the like key contributors to realizing children ready for school? So what is going to be supporting them to meet those developmental milestones, starting prenatally, thinking about the family part, the community part, it's multi-sector, it's all those things really coming together, really coming together. One of the most important key things that's going to be happening to bring that about for children is, of course, that their families are healthy, stable, and attached, and that there is a real sense of families being empowered to support their children's development. I always think about this as like, I understand myself as a parent, as a leader in my own family. I feel confident, I feel capable, I really know what to do. And no matter what any of our program's ultimate missions are, I would hope that all of them focus on empowering families to support their children's development. Parenting education, home visitation, Oregon pre-kindergarten program, preschool promise, all of them, even if that, you know, fundamentally we may think, oh, preschool promise is a preschool program, but we still want the families that are participating in that to feel empowered to support their children's development. So families supported as children's first teachers, families having equitable access to critically important services, which you all know and are fighting to make true. High quality, affordable early care and education, support for physical and social emotional health, these coordinated comprehensive services, and opportunities for families to connect with infants. These should sound familiar to you because these are a key part of what is in Raise Up Oregon. So what is reflected in this theory of change is not just your input and your expertise, what the research literature tells us, it also really is very much integrated and tied into our Raise Up Oregon plan, which of course is also based on research, also based on your input. So in many ways, this is it's extremely aligned with some of the most powerful factors that help us understand how to make change. The way to understand healthy, stable, and attached family work is really, these are some of those early outcomes that are going to be leading to that population level change. The more impact we can really have that's positive for families, the more access we can make sure that people have to needed supports and services, the more likely it is that children will arrive ready for kindergarten. So then we move back to the next column, which is really at the core, I think, of why, of course, hubs were created, which was to really create this effective multi-sector early childhood system, because that happens from a systems level understanding. An early childhood system is multi-layered. So there's the, as you know, state level work that's happening, regional work that's happening, there's community work that's happening, there's work that's happening and very specifically with specific families. So there's many layers of that systems work. So when we talk about multi-sector work, we're really talking about building these coherent systems that are connecting families with needed supports and opportunities. When all the work that we've been doing associated with kind of understanding where we are with the development of our regional systems and the interface with the state system in Oregon, we've been talking about alignment. What does that mean? What does it really mean to align your programs, your practices, your policies, and your investments? So that isn't just we're sitting at the table and we're all talking about the good work we do. That is, we actually decide that we're going to implement shared practices in our community. So no matter where you go, you're going to see similar things happening. And it isn't just something the hub is doing. It is something that every member of the hub that has a practice like that goes back to their agency and does this work too. So it's the realization of the benefit of coming together to talk in actually taking direct action that is aligned for the good of families, ultimately for the good of children. Same with coordinated, same with family-centered. And I think that one of the things that was really been helpful for me to understand in the process of this development of this theory of change has been, and we all know this, we have a lot more work to do related to our system being family-centered. One of the ways this was described when I came into this field of work in the early 1990s was like, we need a Copernican revolution. We need to put, just like it was a revolution for Copernicus when he put the sun at the center of the solar system, it's the same kind of revolution when we put the family at the center here. And we say, that's what family-centered means. That means we are actually putting them at the center. And that some of the terminology that we've included in here, we hope really gets to that around easy for families to navigate. So I can say with confidence that that is not as true now as any of us would wish it would be. So how do we continue to aspire to that? And then led by family voice. This column of the theory of change is really about the system changes that need to happen to lead to these early outcomes that will lead to the impact. And then the last part of the theory of change is really this collaborative action. So how do we have these multi-sector efforts taking place? And these systems change strategies is this first section, which is really about the stakeholders, families, direct staff, agency leaders, funders are taking action to improve local systems. So we've got a variety of actors acting together in unison to create the kind of systems changes that we need to produce the kind of early outcomes, ultimately the kind of impact. And so that's things like addressing root causes that are appearing within your local communities. That's doing the critically important cross-sector work that you all are doing. That's really integrating efforts and understanding, like, how do we, I'm not so much of a believer that we can necessarily break down the silos, but I'm a great believer in the fact that we can knit them and weave them together and create better pathways between them. And that we're really implementing effectively, and that effective implementation is about 75% of the work that we need to be doing. And that, we spend much more of our time planning than we actually do effectively implementing. And one of the key things that's going to help us make progress on these systems changes is increasing the effectiveness of our implementation. And these system change strategies, this is the place where ELD and hubs OHA and hubs, you know, the Department of Human Services and hubs, and other state entities and hubs. This is where we have the opportunity to really come together. And so one of the things that I know I've heard over and over again is we want to understand how we can synergistically be working together on systems change strategies. And I think that part of what is critical about this theory of change is it helps us see, like, this is one of the critically core spaces in our work where that needs to happen. So when we're working on coordinated enrollment and we want to have improved implementation, what is ELD doing? What kind of conversations are we having with you? What kind of conversations are you having with us? What kind of conversations are you having with families? What kind of conversations are you having with CCR&Rs? And that we're really bringing together our collective efforts. And certainly we've heard in all the stakeholder engagement that we've done for the legislative report, this is an area of mutual need that we have probably the greatest opportunity to realize improvement is in our ability to talk, think, and work together in ways that are supportive, honest, kind, and also that make sure that we never lose track that we're trying to make system changes because we're here to get outcomes and because we want to have impact for children and families. That's why we're trying to do those things together. And then ultimately, at the very, that's really the foundation of all of this in terms of realizing the kind of change we want is having effective early learning hubs. And that there's some things that we know that you told us about loud and clear that very much align with the research that have to be in place for that to happen. And that's really, and these are here at a high level, and then we'll just take a brief look at some of the rest of this. Like we have to, like the research is clear, there has to be a shared vision that inspires collective action. Action taking, that is not coming, as you all know, to hub meetings. That is not collective action, that is going to a meeting. Collective action is leaving the meeting and taking shared actions in my own agency, with another agency. That's the kind of collective action towards the shared vision that we really want to be getting to. And we want everyone to be able to see that and talk about it and promote it much better than I think we have in the past. And that's what we're hoping will come out of some more shared work with all of us together. We have to have engaged cross-sector and community partners. We have to have system-focused problem solving and action. And there are some critically important attributes to this. We have to have rapid feedback and continuous improvement, a huge area of growth for both the early learning division and I think in support of early learning hubs is how do we work with the data we have? How do we get a better pathway to the data we need? How are we able to actually get the data we need to be able to understand the impact of our decisions and make better decisions? And I think it's clear from this theory of change that without that, we are missing like a fundamental building block. And then of course, effective convening, which is something that we heard over and over and over again is such a strength of the hubs, is as the neutral convener, they're bringing people together in your regions. So that feels like that is very strong and a real place to build from. And of course, many of these other areas are strong as well, but that I have to say is probably, if I did a word search, is the thing that the most people said about their hub is the importance of their hub as a convener for their region. So the way to think about how this is set up is that just like I talked you through this, potentially you could talk others through this with support and assistance, right? And you can also, and we won't go into all the detail about it today, but you can break it down. You can talk by segments. You can start from the back in terms of like, what do we need to do? And let's look at how well we're doing things. that are back here, Hub Governance Council and community, how well are we actually realizing these important factors that are associated with us being able to take this collaborative action that are going to help us get to these systems changes, early outcomes, impact. So it gives you a way, I think, in one page to be able to say, like, when people say to you, well, what do hubs do? Well, it's like, here's what we do and how we do it. And we do those things because we are working on systems change strategies, because we know we need those if we're going to get to systems changes through this multi-sector, so we can realize our goals associated with families and with children. So I know that one of the things that we're going to want to do in the coming year is to be able to provide ample opportunity for everyone to become comfortable being able to talk about the theory of change and share it and make it useful to you, because that's the whole purpose of having them, is to be able to help them be utility and to be able to, as I said, understand if they hold up. I'm pretty confident in this theory because it's so based both in your expertise, your deep and lived experience, and it so aligns with what the research says about everything we know to date about what actually helps entities like hubs realize these kind of population level changes. But I'm open to the fact that there's still more to understand, and I hope that this theory of change would evolve over time. So maybe we'll just take a quick little peek at what's behind this. Carmen, if you could just scroll through. So you can see that then for every section, there's some additional information and research associated with why what is in here is in here. If you want to keep going. And then here you can see it starts to integrate in and show you how the theory of change is connected to Raise Up Oregon objectives. And then we've got the multi-sector early childhood system, which then shows you again the connection with both research and Raise Up Oregon, if you want to scroll through this. I do want to stop when you get to family centered, just to keep, I think it's the next one.
So this is that change document, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And is we are going to have to go through and
I don't know if you want us to,
or is this just a format?
Hello, I don't know that you want us to hear your private.
It's a format, but do the grant proposal, right?
The host can mute everyone.
All right, I'm going to do that.
I cannot find, I don't know why Joan does not come up.
You can also just click on boxes, like if you see.
I think it's black, isn't it? Wow.
And then that box, mute them in that box also.
Donna, I think you're not on mute.
Okay. I think I muted her. All right. Okay. Can we go to the family-centered section? Okay. So I want you to notice what's in this family-centered section. Not very much. Because we don't really have a specific objective that's associated with becoming a family-centered system. And so we definitely have a very strong objective around strengthening our state community connections, which of course is much of what I've been talking about in our regional systems. But the strongest thing we have is right now is strategy 10.1 around ensuring family voice in system design and implementation. So compared to the other sort of objectives that we have, this might be an area for us to think about, and for us to think about how we might shine just a bit more light on this, because I know from the engagement that we've done and what many of you have talked to me about over the years has been like, we really want to do more. We know we could do better. We need more resources. We need more support. We need more TA. So I think we can all say that many of you are making efforts or strides. Some of you have been making efforts or strides for some time, but it's still a real opportunity for our system to make advancement that we haven't yet made. Okay. Then we get into the systems change strategies, where each of these, like these strategic elements here, like what makes a powerful strategy, that is how to think of this. So a powerful strategy that will bring about systems change, addresses root causes, is cross-sector, is integrated, meaning it's happening in multiple places at multiple layers of the system at the same time, and it's being effectively implemented, and that it takes all of those things to make an effective systems change strategy. So I think this is, like I said, a real place for us to think and work together in terms of the systemic work that ELD might be promoting and wanting to engage in with hubs, and for us to be supporting work that you might be lifting up from the community level. And then Carmen, if we could just spend a couple minutes looking at this last part. So in this section, what really is here, and I think is worth your time, is kind of looking at what is each of the kind of sub elements here in this theory of change. So when we say shared vision, what really makes that up? Because it's an umbrella term for some very specific things. And what's in here are the things that have the closest line in terms of the research that seems to support that if these things aren't there, then you don't really have, effectively, you aren't going to realize that shared vision. So for example, just using that, clearly defined shared goals, explicit focus on equity, shared measurement. I know, a challenge for all of us, and empowered champions. You know, on the face of it, the average person might not have imagined that when we shared vision, that's essentially what we were talking about. So I do want to encourage you to spend time kind of looking at each of these. We also will have a literature review that is from which this is taken, but this is what is in the theory of change to help support you talking about it and using it to educate both yourself as need be and others that you might share it with. This is an extraction from the broader literature review, but that we will be also publishing that broader literature review as a part of the legislative report. So you'll have access to that as well. So I wanted to share that with you today. I wanted you to understand how we're going to use it in terms of putting it into the report. And then Carmen, I think we could stop sharing and then see if people would like to ask questions, share a thought or a comment. Just interested in hearing from people regarding the theory of change.
This is Bess. I'll jump in here. First of all, just really kudos. What a great one pager. First of all, love seeing that image, that first page of just having it mapped out that way. That, to me, my brain makes sense of that in a really easy way. So I really appreciate that. And I can totally already see the number of conversations that can be generated using that. And I think it's going to be a great tool in our community to talk about just hub level work, because we've all had such a hard time encapsulating it with shared language across the state. So that's awesome. So thank you for all the work that went into that. Couple questions for me. One is, I was thinking to myself as I'm looking at that effective early learning hub box on the left hand side and thinking like, if I was putting myself in the shoes of, say, like my CCR&R director partner, sort of where do you see R&Rs in this map? And to that end, sort of other community partners that if we're having a community conversation about it, they may be wondering, where do I fit in this? And just if you have any just ways to sort of explain that, that would be super helpful. And then real quickly, will it come with a bibliography of the, I know you said there'll be a literature review in addition to that, but will you have just a truncated version of a bibliography to reference the articles?
Yeah, did that version not have the endnote, the citations?
It had citations in the descriptions. I don't know if we scroll down long enough to see the bibliography.
Yeah, there's
there. There was like 2 pages of it. Yeah.
Oh, good. Great. Cool.
The literature review, I think, might have 13 pages. So I think I have a lot of possible references to explore. So, Carmen, could we go back to the one pager real quick? Do you mind? So I can just talk about the CCR&Rs.
Joan, this is Molly, and if to build on Bess, if you could also reference the other ELD funded programs in our communities, you know, like Healthy Families and Relief Nurseries, or
yeah,
you know,
so
how that fits.
If you think about the petals, right? That are in Raise Up Oregon, the different colors of the petals, the early care and education sector is where the CCR&R is, right? And the way to think about the CCR&R is that it is an investment that the early learning division makes in the early care and education sector in every region in Oregon. And it is a strategy that's associated with the objective of assuring high quality, affordable early care and education. And if you wanted to think about other programs, they would show up in a variety of ways that are associated with achieving. Some of them are designed to achieve system changes that lead to those early outcomes, in essence. And the reason this theory of change is really focused on the early learning hubs is that you have a unique role in the system in terms of, like, you're not created to produce the same sorts of things as a program is. You're actually created to help to realize something that's quite different from what a program realizes. And so you have to do certain kinds of things to be able to realize the kind of changes that happen as a result of your efforts that are just always going to be quite different than what a program will realize, because you're not providing a direct service to a child or a family in terms of when you're just focusing on your hub role. I know that I know we have at least one hub that's also providing preschool promise, but that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about this theory of change.
Right. I think one of the things that comes up for me a lot is, you know, really wanting my community partners and investment programs that we fund through you is to see themselves as the hub, like that it's not just, you know, the staff at United Way in Eugene and Springfield, that's the hub. It's like, we really want people to identify themselves as part of our early learning system in Lane County. And part of that is really getting them to understand deep in their bones about alignment and coordination and family centeredness. And so I'm just continuing to think about, like, how can I help them see their work along that along that path and give examples, real concrete examples for each of them about what that looks like, what that means, and continually communicate the system, the state level work, the system level work, and how it trickles down to their, direct service, day-to-day ground level staff. So it is just, that challenge of continuing to help sort of, get people to understand their part in it and how critical of a part it is. And that's really just a comment, less of a question.
Yeah. I mean, I see that as like the early learning hub is working with its partners, stakeholders to address to put together powerful systems change strategies, which are addressing root causes, are cross-sector, they're integrated, and they're implemented effectively.
Yeah.
So it's about, and we all know this, it's like healthy families is more successful when healthy families is knitted into the fabric of the community and not just operating as a stand-up single siloed program.
Right.
And so when we're thinking about systems change strategies, they're almost always bundled, meaning what's the programmatic part, but what are the other things that are a part of that bundling so that it's connected with in this case, I'll just make it like the hospital. It's connected with other places that families who would be potentially eligible are touching so that when they meet a family, they know how to refer them. So that's not all the responsibility of the program. That's about how do we knit the program into the fabric of the community because we understand the root cause we're trying to address here. If that helps.
Yeah, that's great. And one last thing, and then I'll be quiet, cede the floor, is I speaking personally, I would love some TA or training down the line around identifying root causes and leading a group to identify a root cause. I've done some of that work with my governance council, and we've tapped into that a little bit, but I don't feel like I have really great facilitator chops around that particular topic, and would just appreciate anything the ELD could share on that. Or help us understand how to walk a group kind of through that. Because I think that could be a really powerful tool for many of the issues that we're all facing in our communities. So again, great work.
Thanks.
Sign me up for that training too, Joan. I want to be there on that one. This is Krista. And I do, of course, have another comment on this. And it goes to what you were saying a moment ago. First of all, I love the vision. Actually, there's so many thoughts in my head, it's hard for me to know where to start, but there were a number of times in this presentation where there were words that were very similar to words that I've heard in the rising up and sundowning of previous systems and trying to figure out, like, how are we doing this differently this time? And how are we emerging in all of this? And so one of the things that I heard that was different this time that I really want to acknowledge is the way that you spoke about the silos in terms of knitting and weaving them together and making better pathways for families. I just think that that is a new way of talking about this work that really emphasizes kind of more of a role in a community and at a region that is really important. And I'm grateful for that because I think it helps to articulate things a little bit better. And I think it also is more asset-based so that we're not pointing fingers at any particular silo to say, oh, you all aren't playing with us and you should be, say, for instance, K-12 or healthcare or whoever it might be. And then I have a gazillion other questions, but I think the biggest thing that is on my mind is you mentioned this thing about effective implementation and that if 75% of our time in implementation, right? And every time I hear that word implementation, it tends to create a certain amount of tension within me, simply because, as you mentioned in your comments just a moment ago, the work that we're trying to do is different than what program implementation people are doing, right? It looks a little bit different. And I wanted to say that I feel like, but I'm acknowledging, recognizing, tangibly noting the the very specific components of what implementation of an effective early learning hub is, looks like, walks like, talks like. And I saw that more in the bottom part of that document where it started to list out, like you were very specific in pointing out, this is what a strategy looks like. This is what this looks like. And I think that, I'll just give a personal anecdote. When I went to college, I thought I was going to be a nurse. Like chemistry, I don't even know what to say about that. So I ended up in a psych class and it just made sense to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, these are words for what I've been doing or what I've been thinking about. And I just want to say, like, I feel like in a way, there's an element of what you've presented that puts words and structure on what I feel like has been a significant portion of my career in this work. And so to be able to think about how we can use this, as you said, to articulate, to engage deeper conversations, to flesh out, to experiment with, is really great. And last but not least, that notion of family engagement, I think equity lives all over the place in this. I don't know how to extract it. It just seems like it's critical in every single layer. And also that I have this sticker on my desk that says create power for powerless. And I really feel as if that family engagement piece and that voice piece and the resources we can have to seriously get into that more deeply is going to enable us to make all of this come to life in a way. And so how we navigate that is important. So thank you for this. It feels like names on something. In a weird way, it's affirmative, and also a nice way of moving forward. And like I said, I have too much to say, so I'm just going to be quiet now. But thank you very much for sharing this information. I'm excited about where it will lead us.
Yeah, thank you, Krista. I appreciate that. I do want to say that I would feel bad if I didn't credit Ann Kubish with my stop focusing on breaking down the silos. We've all spent too many years doing that. Start focusing on knitting them together. Like focus on that instead. Before Ann came to the Ford Family Foundation, she worked for the Aspen Institute, and she wrote for me a very influential report that was really talking about, all these years of investment in transformational community change and why not more for it. And I mean, there's a lot of things in there. I'll send a link if people want to look at it. It's maybe dated, but it had a big impact on me when I read it. And it's one of the reasons I was so delighted when Ann was a member of our Early Learning Council. It just seemed miraculous to have someone with her skills and experience. But it did really change it for me, because I spent a lot of years, like everybody else, talking about breaking down these silos. And it's just such a negative image for people that, nobody really is trying to build a silo that I've ever learned. Most people are just trying to do what they think is their job. So how do you help them understand how what they want and what you want are so much the same thing? And if we can, focus on that, I really feel that is super powerful. So
I know it was a commentary, but do you think collective impact, that was a buzzword that we used a long time ago that seems to have gone the way of the Goonie bird, but can you speak to how you think that terminology and that language fits or doesn't fit into this?
I've personally been very influenced by some of the writing that's come out in the last few years around some of the aspects of collective impact that unfortunately tended to reinforce some of the worst attributes of systems. Like, for example, if you bring together all the leaders of organizations around a single table, are you not just increasing their power if you don't actually focus just as much on making sure that you have family voice in equal measure, and that you are including people that never have been able to get into places of power to help you understand and work on the system. So I think some of the, there's just some really good pieces in there. And you'll see that there's actually in the theory of change, one of the things that it talks about in there is how critical it is for all of you not to be the leaders, but to support the development of leaders. Like the whole idea of, you know, what was called early in my career, this concept of servant leadership, like this non-hierarchical, but how are you essentially creating the conditions? So think about that last foundational box in the theory of change as the conditions you're trying to create. Because the more you can create those things, the more likely you are to be able to get to those powerful systems change strategies. So I think that collective impact, you know, when it first came out, I had my own little stars in my eyes. Look how simple it is, so pure. It's these beautiful little, but it's like, but where were the community voices? Where was the focus on equity? Where was the focus on justice? Like you can't do the kind of work that you all are doing and not be working on justice issues. Because you're right. The fact that families are still essentially fighting to have the same seat at the table as they were when I started my work 30 years ago, that I'm still talking to all of you about that very same topic. Like, what is the root cause of that? That is something that I think we still all are figuring out how to do better with. So.
Yeah, and so my comments are along the same lines. So once again, thank you so much for this. This is like, to me, this is like what we've been asking for a couple of years. Just some clarity on that brings it all together, because this is complex work that we're doing, and it's hard to communicate it. And so I really appreciate all the time and effort that went into this. And I even did my own like testing and making sure it had all the concepts that, you know, that we've been working from, and they're in there. And so it's very comprehensive, very well done. My focus then naturally goes to the blocks on the first page under the early learning hubs, with the eye of, do they accurately convey what's in the description below? And there's a couple that I feel like don't quite get, they don't hit the mark. And so the first thing would be family engagement. So it says engaged cross-sector community partners. That doesn't necessarily, in some people's minds, include families. That could be who are current, you know, that could just be other organizations. So I mean, just as a, you know, way of making suggestion, I would say maybe engaged families and other stakeholders, because you have the other stakeholders described in the next column. Then the bottom one, effective convening, I think that misses the mark, because to me, the more important thing is communication. And that's the constant kind of communication across maybe cross-sector communication and convening. So that might be how I frame that: effective cross-sector communication and convening. So that convening just sounds like, oh, it's just meetings. So we just host meetings, that's all we do. But that's just, you know, one form of communication, right? And then the other one would be the rapid feedback and continuous improvement. I think I would move towards more of what I think Brenda suggested in the chat: continuous quality improvement, because it seems like the focus, we just want to make sure that what we're doing isn't just about improving our efforts, but the whole system, right? So we're looking at the quality of the whole system and looking to make improvements there. So, but yeah, I mean, this is a wonderful tool and it's very exciting. And what I was hoping we would, like, you know, if we've had conversations, what I was hoping would be the end product of the whole legislative session, that we would like all come to some agreement. And I feel like I don't know. I'm really excited. I feel like this is a good, effective, strong representation of what we're all trying to accomplish. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam, and thank you for your feedback. So obviously we're almost at the end of our time. Like I said, this is nowhere the end of the conversation. It's really just at the very, tipping the toes in the water conversation. If other people have very specific feedback like Adam's that you would like us to consider, we really need to get that from you by I would say, I would prefer if I could get it like Thursday-ish, by the end of the day on Thursday. So again, this isn't like wholesale revisions. This is like, I'm worried this word will send the wrong message, because then I can go back to our research partner, Erin Watson. Didn't she do a great job? She's just an amazing, amazing colleague. I feel very fortunate that we got to work with her, and that you all got a chance to interact with her. But I'd like to talk to her about that. I'll just say in the convening, like I said, it is how currently most people describe hubs. And so I appreciate what you're saying, Adam. And I think it's important for us to really think about the right kind of terminology for that, because it can have connotations that do imply like coming together. It just obviously means so much more when you look at what's built out in that section. But I want to make sure that what we're conveying is the right thing. It's hard to build value if you're saying, well, we're really good at meetings, which again, I'm not suggesting you're saying, but it could unfortunately maybe come across that way. And I don't think that's what we're trying to mean at all when we say that. So.
Joan, this is Sue. I'd love to just make a really quick comment. Tomorrow, the division is going to be releasing a progress report on Raise Up Oregon. And I know you all will be receiving it, but I really encourage you to look at it, because it definitely is connected to this idea that we need to weave the silos together and figure out how these cross-sector partners work together, as opposed to trying to destroy or break down some of those silos. And also, as you read the progress report, I ask you to look at it from the hub perspective and say, seeing the progress that has been made, where do you see the hubs fitting into having accomplished that? And where do you see the hubs fitting into sort of the next phase of implementation of Raise Up Oregon? The Early Learning Council is going to be talking about this at our January 27th meeting. So it's definitely a high priority for us to discuss, and getting input from all of you hub directors on how you see the hubs helping us implement this in the next phase, which will be 21-22. So just wanted to put in that pitch and thank all of you for your great work. And Joan, nice presentation today. Really, really well done.
Thank you. Thanks. It was great to be with all of you. Take care. We'll be together again soon. Much more to come.
Joan, is there any guidance on our ability to engage our boards with some of this already? I mean, I feel excited and interested in kind of touching bases, but I don't want to share it without, if there's a due diligence, I want to be respectful of that.
I think we would prefer that we have the legislative report published first.
Okay.
At least submitted first, and then I think then it would be fine after that.
Thank you. That's true. Oh, because it'll all be incorporated in that, as you said. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, right. I will check in with you about possible TA that people are looking for too, around ways to share it with groups.
Okay, great. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.